Welcome to Dungeons & Peppers D&D Rewatch with Gherkin, Morgan, and Sean. Dungeons & Dragons the Cartoon, Episode 3, The Hall of Bones. So this was, in my opinion, the worst of the series so far.
Which is surprising, because it was written by Paul Dini, and Paul Dini's excellent.
Paul Dini's amazing. Paul Dini invented Harley Quinn, who's one of the most important additions to DC canon that's come out of the last, 50 years. Paul Dini was Batman the Animated Series with Bruce Timm. Paul Dini's a really great, genre writer, especially for cartoons. But this was garbage.
I wonder what happened.
Well, he probably was very early in his career, I guess, since this is 1983, October 1st, 1983.
He was 4.5 years old.
and it's a garbage show that probably didn't pay super great. So in this episode, Sean, why don't you get us started? What happened?
They're running through the forest and being chased by levitating primates.
Pretty close, yeah. Not flying monkeys, but
Simian bats.
Simian bats, called out by name by Venger's henchman, who's super cool, and we never get a name or what he's supposed to be. I'm guessing he's supposed to be a shade. Is that what a shade would be in D&D? But he's just a flying bat-winged shadow.
And while trying to fight him off, one by one, their items of power stop working. The bow stops firing arrows. The tree trunk is a tree trunk.
The stick won't get marginally larger or smaller anymore.
The one character is no longer invisible.
And Presto... Does Presto try magic during this point?
I don't think he does, but I could be wrong.
If he did, the episode would be over because he would save the day.
Actually, Presto's item never runs out of charge.
Yeah, which is weird.
Does it?
No,
Did they establish?
Because later in the episode, he pulls a chicken out of his hat and then a fire-breathing dragon head.
So, they get away from the monkeys somehow?
They hide in the lake, breathing through reeds.
Which is such a trope in cartoons that in this episode of Dungeons & Dragons, they don't have to explain that. They just cut to a shot of reeds sticking out of the water and then walking out with them in their mouths. So presumably all children just know that in cartoons, you can always breathe through a reed when you need to hide in a bog or a swamp.
Fuck it, why not?
So they get away, and Dungeon Master shows up. And they're like, hey, our weapons aren't working. He's like, what? Your weapons aren't working?
I don't think he seemed that surprised, but...
He seemed, he at least feigned surprise and tells them that they can get them recharged.
At the Hall of Bones with the Skull of Power.
Is it completely outside of D&D that a weapon would have a charge?
I don't think that's normally how it works. But again, fuck it. Why not? Dungeon Master also tells them that in darkness, they should look to the light. And then they go to a Ren Fair.
And in this Ren Fair...
but he also tells them he has to find a guide, but that guide will require payment.
So they go...
He tells them straight up that they need payment. He knows they have jack shit for money. He is, as far as we can tell... powerful being in this universe. He can't give them any goddamn allowance or guide them there his damn self. What is he doing other than sitting around and winking to their trouble? Also,
they're having a lot of trouble with faces in this episode. Eric the Cavalier's face gets all long and stretched out like a weird guitar pick at one point. The Dungeon Master's face keeps slowly morphing as he's talking, where he looks like a kaleidoscope version of Vern Troyer. He's just kind of squished and stretched out. The animation budget went way down, it seems, for this one particular episode. Maybe this was just a toss-off or a filler.
Maybe. You pointed out that they colored Dungeon Master's bald head white as well, as if it was his hair.
Yeah, but I think mistakes like that are rampant throughout this series. We saw a couple in earlier episodes as well when they put the Ranger's voice into Eric's mouth in one scene. So they get to town. This is the most urban environment they've ever been in. And Mr. 1% decides he's a busker, and he's going to busk them up some money.
And he immediately insults everyone. This is unsurprising.
But, the ball's on him, right? Aggressively attacking the problem, and he's doing something that is very, very difficult. Putting yourself on the spot like that, even if you're born with that kind of silver spoon up your ass, having that level of confidence in the face of people actively disliking it, that says something. Eric, I guess what I'm saying is Eric is slowly growing on me as one of the few characters that I care about in this series, because he's one of the few characters that has character, texture, any kind of depth at all whatsoever.
I think the problem is that the tank keeps trying to be the talker, the charismatic one. And he tries to do that over and over in this episode. Like maybe the player thinks it's funny or cute to make the tank fuck up in social situations.
Well, I think that is an issue of casting. Because Eric, the Cavalier, is played by Ralph the Mouth from Happy Days. And so he is the one who probably had the most comedic chops of all the actors who were cast in the show. And that's why they give him the, quote-unquote humor, all the funny lines to do. And he does seem to either set up or deliver most of the punchlines in every episode we've seen so far. Speaking of every episode we've seen so far, we have never, one time, heard the Ranger or the acrobat's name. So they go to the town, he starts busking, it blows up in his face. They ask Presto to do something?
They ask him to pull coins out of his hat, and he's like, I don't know, I don't think I can do that.
Like, fucking do it, man! Pull your fucking weight! Because, he hasn't been. So he pulls out...
He pulls a chicken out of his hat, and then just throws it away, as if he's not in a market.
Yeah.
Where he could...
And then he pulls out a fire-breathing dragon.
Yeah.
Which he reasonably puts away, but once again, going to my theory that he is the most powerful character in this world that we have experienced so far. And that's enough to get people's attention. They start throwing them coins because they've never seen magic before.
Maybe it's a little magic world.
Seriously? We have dragons in every single fucking episode.
Yeah, but not too many random weird kids can pull a fire-breathing dragon out of their hat.
We've seen one wizard, and that was fake Merlin. So, yeah, maybe magic users aren't a thing so far in this realm. So, they get the money. Presto, once again, saving the day, making money happen. Like, they asked him to make money, he made fucking money.
So they go to a sketchy bar full of scum and villainy.
Yep. And Eric, once again, tries to be the charismatic character and negotiate getting guidance from a bunch of creatures that don't speak English or common or whatever.
Who are maybe orcs or maybe kobolds or maybe a combination of like weird interbreeding between kobolds and orcs.
They have like crocodile faces but with pig noses.
Like, they're way too big to be kobolds.
And German helmets.
and weird little Nazi biker helmets, yeah. That gets everyone's attention, and then they're going to beat him up for some reason.
Because he has a big bag of money, and they want the big bag of money, and they don't understand that he's offering to give them the big bag of money if they help them.
Except one of the people shown in the cafe who wants to beat him up, who stabs the table with his knife, is Shirtless Farmer, and Shirtless Farmer sticks his head out the door at the end of the scene and says, "They went that way!" So at the very least, he speaks some common.
Okay.
To prevent Eric from getting his ass handed to him by a variety of just the dregs in the monster manual, just the weirdest, stupidest looking monsters that we've seen in the series so far. The Ranger, name unknown to this point, says, "Why go after that little bag of money when we've got this big bag of money?" He's got like a fucking hefty cinch sack full of gold coins that have come from fucking nowhere. And he's offering that to the monsters in exchange for not killing Eric. And again, why should he care? What happens to Eric? They're not friends.
I mean, Eric did save them with his magic shield a little while ago.
But why couldn't someone else use the magic shield? I mean, it hasn't come up yet in the show that anyone else uses anyone else's weapons, but clearly Venger thinks he can use the weapons. So it does leave open the door that other people can feasibly use the weapons. If Eric died, that would just be one more magic weapon for someone.
They're kids. They're probably not quite that ruthless. And they're also the only people from their universe they know. There's probably a certain amount of camaraderie. By teenage age, I think that they wouldn't go quite that far out of their way to let somebody die if they have a way to prevent it.
I don't know. We will agree to disagree on that one. So they try and save the Cavalier with a big bag of money. Everyone freaks out, and they throw them the big bag of money, and our heroes run away, and they're like, "Why are they still chasing us?" After Shirtless Farmer sticks his head out the window and goes, "They went that way." And they said, "Oh, that wasn't a big bag of money. It was a bag of bottle caps?"
Because fuck it. Why not?
And the issue here isn't that it was a bag of bottle caps. It's, where the fuck did it come from? Did Presto conjure it? Because they don't explain that. Is it from the same place that red orb of fire that got fired at the dragon a couple episodes back that never got explained came from? Is there someone just off screen with a Deus Ex Machina pumping shit out whenever they need it?
Because exactly.
So it was frustrating. So they run. And they run so far away, then they find... Are they down an alley?
Yeah, they run into an alley and they find a
pretty lady that's
pretty
gonna help
lady with a
them.
torch. And they thought back to Dungeon Master saying, when in darkness, look to the light.
And find a guide.
And so she helps them by taking them directly to Venger and turning into a giant spider.
Because she is Lolth, the god of the drow. Which in my mind looks more like a Drider, like top half woman, bottom half giant spider. But in this interpretation is a spider with kind of a lady face who shoots webs out of her feet instead of her butt like a spider would.
Oh, you know. She's a god. She does what she wants.
So do they...
She tricks them into falling into the web, and then Venger shows up and
the
takes
floor
their
falls
weapons.
And so Venger takes all the weapons and pieces out. He's gone. And Lolth is going to eat them, but Uni saves the day with her magical horn, cuts the webs.
And freakish strength.
And freakish strength, when Lolth shoots Uni with a web, and Uni manages, purely through her intestinal fortitude, to hold up this like 400-pound giant spider that's dangling from the end of the web. Uni manages to cut that web too, and leave Lolth to fall to her doom in a bottomless hole. Did they say it was bottomless?
Bottomless pit, yeah.
A bottomless pit. But now, they're underground. They're in what is called, in this realm, the...
Underworld?
As opposed to the Underdark, because that would be confusing. So,
Fuck it.
they're
Why
wandering
not?
around the underworld when there's a giant earthquake, and they're complaining, oh no, we're stuck in the underworld, we're never going to get out, it's so dark and scary and terrible. Oh, what's that? And there's a giant earthquake in like fucking Land of the Lost. This giant chasm opens in the wall, and they're like, we can go out that way. No, let's not go out that way. Eric's motivation is often very confusing to me.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't know what's out there. He doesn't know why it suddenly opened.
But seconds earlier, he was complaining about the fact that he didn't have a way out of here, and a way out of here shows up, and now he's complaining about the fact that they want to go out the exit.
Well, I mean, they needed a guide, and then there suddenly was a guide, and then she was a giant spider that tried to eat them.
Okay, so if we are attributing to Eric a sense of perspective, then yeah, I'll give you that. And since he is the only character who has any kind of development so far...
If that development is PTSD.
Yeah, and he's the only one who speaks, for the most part. Yeah, I'll give you that. So they get outside, and who do they find here?
Tiamat.
And?
Venger.
And they're...
Fighting.
Yay!
And Venger goes, you have met your master, Dragon Queen. And Tiamat says, fuck you. I ain't got no master.
Which leaves Morgan to believe that Venger is trying to control Tiamat.
Yes, and that is why he wants the magic weapons.
Whereas I believe Venger just wants the magic weapons. I think he's just an obsessive collector person, and he wants the magic weapons. But neither of that really matters, because when the magic weapons don't work, when he tries to use them on Tiamat because they are running out of charge, he throws them away. Venger, we have to presume, has lived in this world for some amount of time. In the Day of the Dragons, everyone knows who Venger is without ever having met him. In Eye of the Beholder, the Garlic Knight knows who Venger is without ever having met him. And when Venger shows up, knows him on sight. People know who Venger is. So Venger has some degree of infamy in this world. People know who he is. He's been around long enough to earn that. He is obsessed with these magic items. Every time we see our heroes, they're being chased by Venger who wants these magic items. You think that he would know that in this world, magic weapons have charges, and that he wouldn't throw them in the garbage the moment they didn't work the way he wanted them to.
Perhaps he knew somehow that the kids were there and they would pick them up and go to get them recharged. That's probably giving him too much credit.
That's giving
but
him a lot of credit.
Perhaps it's not typical for magic items to have charges. These are not typical magic items.
Right. I mean, I've seen them referred to online as totems of power. I don't know if they're ever called that within the series.
I mean, so for one, like the tree trunk, the bat has the power to like crack mountains and fell trees with a single blow. And also, it seems like these items also assign them a class.
I think they were more equivalent to wondrous items from Dungeons and Dragons. A much more powerful magic item that require attunement and all that kind of stuff.
Anyways, I don't think these are typical magic items, so maybe it's not obvious how they work.
To Venger, the one obsessed with getting them. So he throws them away. And the
For
kids,
2 episodes. 3 episodes.
3 episodes he's been obsessed with it. We can assume there's a pattern that he will continue with his obsession ongoing because he doesn't care about killing kids. He's made that clear. He does not care about killing these kids. That's not his motivation. Getting their weapons is his motivation. He gets their weapons. They don't work exactly right. He throws them away. And it's not like they don't work at all. They work. They just don't work as well as he wants them to because they're running out of power. So the kids get their weapons back after Venger and Tiamat go their separate ways. Then, Mr. Spooky Shadow Man...
Well, first they say, hey, we have these back. Now we can go to the Hall of Bones and get them recharged. And then as they're walking away, Shadow Man pops out of a crack in the wall and goes, oh, the Hall of Bones. Alright, so creepy shadow guy goes, hey, they're gonna go to the Hall of Bones. And then it just cuts to them walking in a meadow somewhere. We don't know how they got there.
A really nice meadow. Like,
Yeah.
it's pastoral and everything's pastel colored and the trees look kind of fluffy. They're walking through this pastoral landscape.
And they're whining about how they don't know where they're going. They still need a guide.
And they find a
Floating face.
in the middle of the road, just hovering there with a basketball-sized head.
And he's like, what? You've never seen a halfling before? And they're like, we can't even see all of you.
And so he uncovers himself from the magic that had him hid. And he is not a halfling.
I mean, he could be.
In this world, halflings wear fur trousers.
No, I
They
think
don't
he's
wear
wearing
pants.
a tunic and no pants.
No pants at all, but is covered entirely in fur from the belly button to his toes. Now I know halflings...
I think they call that shirt cocking at the bathhouse.
He's shirt cocking. So he says,
I'm a guide.
I know where the Hall of Bones is. I'll take you there. Eric isn't into this. Eric does not like this at all. Eric has a bad feeling, maybe? But Eric doesn't like all, at least, the exercise they're having to do. Because there's a lot of climbing and lots of rocks falling on his head and lots of really stupid one-liners. And they finally get to a point where Eric is fed up. It's like, no, let's tell this guy to fuck off. And weirdly, everyone kind of agrees with him.
Well, didn't he hurt Uni? I think everybody will rally around not fucking with the baby
Well,
unicorn.
he didn't hurt Uni. Uni just jumped and landed on its legs wrong.
Oh. I thought he'd, like, knocked rocks onto her or
No,
something.
Uni knocked rocks onto Eric.
Oh, okay. Well, you can't blame the baby unicorn.
You can't blame the baby unicorn, and no one is. But they are pissed at the Hobbit for having led them so long to this point. They're like, you said you'd take us to the Hall of Bones. And like, I did. It's right there.
And there it is. Scary-ass glowy castle.
Let's all go in. I'll come with you. There's nothing suspicious about this in any way.
Yeah, like, you know how Dungeon Master said you'd need to pay your guide, and this guy doesn't seem to want any payment?
At all. So they go inside what is basically like Geiger's Castle Grayskull. And inside it, they find a giant demi-lich. Just, it's the size of like a Volkswagen bus, and it's just a huge green glowing skull. Their halfling compatriot. So, Mr. Bobkins, or whatever his name is, says, that's the Skull of Power. It said it gets its power from all the heroes that are buried here.
And the kids go, cool! And they all put their magic items in the skull's mouth. And then they're better.
And all their items are better. Episode over.
And then the subject of payment comes up.
As does Venger's third power. We've known up to this point that Venger could A, shoot force beams, B, fly while also holding a horse up with his thighs. Now C, he has a third power. He can shapeshift back and forth between Venger, Ultimate Evil, and Venger, half bugbear, half hobbit.
You can also teleport other people to and fro, like the knight's kid. He teleported
That's true.
the kid from wherever to where he was.
So four powers.
Yeah.
4 powers. So to the best of our knowledge, he's the only other magic user we've seen in the series so far, aside from Merlin, who was him. So he's like, I'll take my payment in the form of your items. Give me all your stuff, kids.
And the kids say, oh hey, in darkness, go to the light and jump in the giant magic skull.
Because it's glowing, as we said earlier. The
fuck
skull
it.
swallows
God.
them whole and begins to glow much more brightly. All of this, what we thought were statues, but I guess are the mummified corpses of other heroes around them, turn into a big swirling mass of spirits like in Raiders. They form a phalanx between the kids and Venger and say, this is our fight now, not yours. And pa-cha-cha-ching, they are teleported to outside of Castle Grayskull, which then explodes
Yeah.
with atomic force into a giant mushroom
Well,
cloud.
they have to run away and they almost don't make it.
Yes, there's a moment of actual tension, I guess.
Eh.
When the Aquapat succeeds on their dex save.
Still unnamed acrobat who. So she jumps the crevice. They're all good. Giant mushroom cloud atomic explosion of magic in Castle Grayskull. They're like, well, do you think they defeated Venger? Then Venger, as a giant bat symbol, emerges from the explosion, followed by a stream of human spirits beaming up into the air as they ascend into the heavens. The ranger says, well, that answers your question.
No, it fucking doesn't.
No, it really doesn't. It's not in any way clear what happened. Did Venger ascend into godhood? And that's it.
That's it.
That's the episode.
And like every goddamn episode, it ends on Dungeon Master sitting around the corner, being a creep.
Saying, well, you'll get home eventually, most likely. Boom, smash cut to end credits. So, this was the worst episode of the series so far. There was no narrative thrust. There was no motion. There was nothing going on that mattered in any way. It was just like, let's run a quick errand.
And then there's just a series of 10 random encounters between start and finish.
So it was like a really tedious game of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
It was just, let's just roll random encounters. This is filler until we get to the next big set piece.
Seems like the GM, the actual GM of the game, not the Dungeon Master, was kind of a jerk. Because I think every action the kids took was wrong, and they only succeeded like randomly through like fate or whatever. It's like whenever they try to take any sort of initiative, I think they all.
No, sometimes you fail all of your insight rolls.
But this, as we discussed, this GM is really railroady.
That too.
These,
What is he even railroading them towards here, though?
we don't know, but they have no player initiative. And if we for a moment put Dungeon Master into the guise of the GM, if Dungeon Master's actually planning everything out, he tells them what to do, they do it. They cannot succeed on their own except through luck. He gives them the answers to all the riddles beforehand. I mean, he is pushing them in a very specific direction every single step of every single episode, assuming he is the one who's setting all this up and running it. But there is not a lot of player agency. They do not have a lot of freedom of choice, and I think that comes up later in the series more prominently, that they don't get to do the things that they may want to do. And every time they have a way home, they dangle that carrot in front of them to keep them in Dungeons & Dragons, to keep them in this realm, to pull them back out. Okay, well, that was a shit episode. I don't recommend watching it. I think any of the others...
Do you recommend watching any of these?
Yes. I do recommend watching these for nostalgia value, but going back, any of the other 3 episodes, if you're going to watch Dungeons & Dragons the cartoon, don't watch all 27 episodes. We're doing that for you. But definitely skip the Hall of Bones.
It might be faster to watch the episodes on your own, though.
All right. Thank you for listening.